It is no surprise that the Charlotte Hornets have started this season off at 4-7 through 11 games. The one thing that has been consistent with this team throughout the past 5-10 years is that they haven't been that good. But there is one thing that has started to change this year, that despite starting 4-7, is that they have youth on their side. Before, this team, when you would look at them, they had a mix of a bunch of random vets. They were an organization that, would take players in on trades or sign free agents maybe for more than they were worth because they just wanted to get a star level player or a guy with some name value because they're in a smaller market. But since they've drafted LaMelo Ball a few years ago and built up some pretty solid players throughout their time, this team has continued to show promise with some of their young players. Obviously, LaMelo Ball, a top 3 pick in the past a few years ago, has continued to improve, and despite some injuries going into his now 5th season already, it is definitely noticeable that he's still going to continue to improve, and he has. He's putting up nearly 23 points per game, 8 rebounds, and almost 10 assists per game. Those are very good stats, and you may say, empty stats on a team like this, but when we look at it, he is surrounded by some pretty solid young players that I think could help this team really develop into maybe not a contender anytime soon, but at least have a solid core that you could build up and potentially build around. Now, the Hornets just went out without LaMelo Ball, who's actually been out for a few games now since the start of November. Another guy that has been out as well has been a former number 2 overall pick in the first round in 2023 in Brandon Miller. And despite both of these guys being out, 2 of their top 5 picks within the past 5 years, this team has continued to build around that young core, and they've continued to make some pretty decent draft picks so far that we've seen, but this year it seems like their 2 rookies have been very good so far, in my opinion. In a 2nd round pick in Ryan Kalkbrenner, who coming out of Creighton at 23 years old, a little bit on the older side, which you usually get with that 2nd round pick, has been pretty solid so far. 9.2 points per game, 6.6 rebounds. He's leading the NBA in field goal percentage at 80%. Yes, he is a center, but still, that's pretty good shooting overall. And, obviously he's not going to be going out there shooting the 3, but he has got a lot of decent looks. Going up against the Bucks, he was perfect. 8 for 8 from the field in that game. Going up against Miles Turner for most of it, who has been in the NBA for over a decade now, right? It's not just a pushover there. We're talking about Miles Turner, who was just in the finals as well. This team is the 7th youngest team in the NBA right now, and not very far off from being close to the top. Their average age is 24. The Nets are the youngest at 23. So pretty close to being one of the youngest teams, if not the youngest team in the NBA. And one of the older players on this team, obviously being LaMelo Ball, at 24 years old, which is their average age, but being older, being there for 5 years, obviously drafted at 19, so he's still definitely young at only 24 years old, but more experienced in being one of the guys that's been there for a while, and there has been some trade talks around him. I don't think that they would get rid of him, but another guy that they brought in who has been good so far for them and helped this team a lot with a veteran presence is Colin Sexton. And when we talk about a veteran presence, right, a guy that was drafted in 2018, he's still only 26. That's what I'm talking about when we're looking at this team. When we look at this roster, there are so many great young players, right? A guy who they just got in Pat Connaughton as well, a real veteran for this roster at 32 years old. If he wasn't on this team would be even younger overall. But most of these guys that are getting real minutes every single night, guys like Miles Bridges as well, on the older side for this roster at 27 years old, but still not even close to 30. He's got a few more years until he reaches that. But their first round pick from this year that I want to talk about, who has been playing outstanding basketball and has helped this team tremendously so far this season, playing in almost every game so far, has been Con Kneppel. Out of Duke, this was a guy that was projected to be a first-round pick. Many weren't really sure where he was going to be, but with that March Madness run that he had and the weeks leading up to it as well, projected him all the way into the top 5, and the Hornets would take him with the 4th overall pick this year, and he has been great. When first round picks go, 20 years old, maybe on the little bit of the older side, with an August birthday for him, we see a lot of these players being 18 and 19 at this point now, but this guy has been great so far. We're talking about over 16 points per game so far, and he has been almost lights out for a rookie shooting the 3 ball. So far this season, shooting 40% from the 3, which is fantastic, especially for a rookie, because there's a big difference taking that leap from college basketball up to the NBA, but he has proven that he can be a knockdown shooter for this team. And the combination of him and Ryan Kalkbrenner, like I said before, both of their picks have been playing great basketball for them. And despite this Hornets team losing, it seemed like in the past, there weren't very many directions for this team, but as they continue to develop these young players, maybe you start to look around and say, if I'm a star level player, maybe I want to go play with this young core that they're finally being able to build together, because it seemed like they had some swing and misses the past few years with some of their draft picks. Brandon Miller hasn't exactly proven to be that guy that they would expect with a number 2 overall pick. Despite dealing with some injuries, he's still putting up 18 points per game in his career, but missing most of last season and really only playing a good amount of minutes in his first season as a rookie. Only 27 games last year, still dealing with an injury this season as well. You would expect him to continue to develop, and if you can get him to continue to develop and build this team around their shooters that they have, obviously LaMelo Ball has been able to, we know what we're getting from LaMelo Ball at this point, right? Maybe he's not entered his prime yet when we talk about in a few more years, but we know what we're getting from him. He's a guy that can give you 25 and 10 every night, and I don't think anyone would be surprised. Con Kneppel has been great for them so far. We'll have to see if he can continue that play that he has been putting out there, and this team has a very, very underrated player, in my opinion, in Collin Sexton. Everyone knows about Collin Sexton. Everyone knows how good he can be, but I think that was a very underrated pickup that they went out, Collin Sexton going to the Hornets. I think that was one that wasn't talked about enough and has proven to pay dividends so far for this team. Like I said, I don't think they're going to be competing anytime soon, but this team is fun to watch. This team has some good young players, and, maybe they'll be a buyer at the deadline and maybe not compete this year, but at least be a little more competitive than the past few years when you're winning 10, 20, maybe 30 games. I think this team can really start to build something within the next few years and maybe start to get towards the playoffs potentially within the next 3 years. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think this is a little bit of an exaggeration? Do you think the Hornets are going to continue to be at the bottom of the East for the next decade or so? Or do you think they're actually building something special in Charlotte right now? Let me know down below what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one.